talking about sustainability for new gen entrepreneurs, we move on to the next panel discussion, which is on sustaining entrepreneurship ecosystem by successful entrepreneurs and family offices. And our moderator for the session today is Mr. Meenakshi Sundaram, who's also just known as TCM. And TCM is the founder and vice chairman of Chiratae Ventures, which is a leading tech venture capital fund with about $950 under its management. He's a chartered accountant by qualification and has over 35 years of experience, including 16 years of venture experience. And, just for the audience, we are taking questions. If you have any questions, please do let us know. There's a chat box. You can please enter your questions. And time permitting, the panel will address your questions. TCM, over to you.
Thank you, Ekta. We have a very diversified panel here. We have Mr. Manish Choksi, who is Vice Chairman of Asian Paints, having been part of running the business for over 25-30 years. Krishna Kumar, who was the founder, a dear friend. In fact, we have known each other now for over 30 years from Wipro days, and then, founder and of Mindtree Consulting, and now actually he is the founder of Mehta Ventures. So after his stint for nearly 2 decades in Mindtree Consulting, scaling it after the exit, he has now moved on to actually helping entrepreneurs. And Peyush, again, one of the entrepreneurs who is building a phenomenal company and with global focus, taking it forward. And Amit from Island Bango's family office. So we have people who are investors, who are entrepreneurs, and I thought this will be a good forum to discuss about sustaining entrepreneurship ecosystem by all of you. Maybe we can start with each of you sharing your perspective in terms of starting the investments side. And KK, maybe you are the one who consciously and formally started a fund after your entrepreneurship, right? Maybe it will be great to hear your perspective in terms of what motivated you to do this. You are on mute.
Thank you, Meenakshi, and thanks, Ty, for giving me this opportunity. I think when we exited Mindtree, one of the things which I realized was that while there's so much of talk about the Indian startup ecosystem, which is very vibrant, is that only 4% of startups succeed. And when we really looked at companies which had failed, we found that they were making very typical mistakes, which with the support of good entrepreneurs who have done the operating role, they could easily build successful enterprises. So coupled with that was the global technology scenario, where we realized that in the next 10 years, almost close to $1 trillion of enterprise technology investments will come up for renewal. And building a software as a service business is a great opportunity. And we realized that India can really create many category leaders. So we really said we'll couple capital with our operating experience and help entrepreneurs build globally successful companies, which in a way enables to take the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem to the next level. So the motivation was to build globally successful companies, really accelerate the extent of success within the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, and in the bargain also make good money. So that was the motivation.
Thank you, KK. Manish, you've been an angel investor for now about 15 plus years, and also directly investing in companies and through funds. This is a high risk asset class, right? So what excited you, what motivated you to get into this side?
So I think PCM and
panel, and to Ty, thanks for the opportunity. I think when we looked at our family office in those days, maybe about 10 odd years back, we were a classic family office which invested in public markets, both debt and equity. However, there was at least, with the knowledge that I had from the IT world, there was a feeling that there would be a whole upsurge in the kind of new age entrepreneurs, creating a large amount of enthusiasm as well as creating a large number of companies that would be very differentiated from sort of the brick and mortar world or the older world that we all sort of were invested in. And considering this, it made sense to diversify the family office and get into this. Obviously, when one looked at newer avenues, I think you always looked at beginning slow, which is why the individual angel investment started. And then maybe a couple of years later, went into investing in Fund 2 for Chiratae, and then into co-investment opportunities that came along. And today, I think, one is expecting to participate in what I would consider to be the most exciting part of New India. I think a whole bunch of entrepreneurs like Peyush here, creating new age companies like Lenskart. I think that opportunity to be part of that would not happen if you had not invested in the startup ecosystem in that sense of the word. I think to KK's point, are we all helping in the bargain create and sort of give the body of knowledge that one would have gained from the corporate universe? Yes, in some way, acting as part of the advisory board at Chiratae, as well as working in either an advisory or director capacity at some of the newer companies. I think that gives an opportunity to sort of give back whatever one has learned. And I must add that I also learn in the bargain in some sense of word. So it's great to be part of something exciting, something futuristic. And that also at a personal level drives me quite a bit to be part of this ecosystem.
Thank you, Manish. Amit, Ellen Bamboo family has a lot of traditional businesses that they have been part of and rich tradition. And but you've actually been actively also investing in a lot of funds and across assets, and also directly investing in companies. So can you share your perspective and how you are also thinking about helping the entrepreneurs beyond capital?
So I think TCM, while we come from a so-called traditional business family in business for last 100 years, fortunately for us, the why was not such a big question about a decade back when we thought of investing in the new age businesses, as they call. The only thing was how to do it. And I think that, as Manish has rightly put it, I think we are all evolving in that. We started slow and trying to just catch up and evolve as the space is moving. So I think historically it has been shown that the problems of mankind are not solved by the larger companies necessarily. While, the listed portfolio and companies like Asian Paints are great compounders, but I think for the new age problems, I think you need new entrepreneurs like Peyush who will come out and solve the problems. To participate in that journey, I think you had to go unlisted and go through either the fund route or directly through startups. So that's the easy answer why we actually did it. How we are helping entrepreneurs, I think the entrepreneurs are leading it. I think we are, only there when they need us, because we've run businesses for so long. We are sensitive to the real realities of business. So whenever there is a need, whenever any entrepreneur reaches out, we are there to help in any way which we can. But the entrepreneur is the king here, and I think people like Peyush and others are leading the way and creating the magic actually.
Yeah. And Peyush, you are a new age entrepreneur, and you've also been investing both in personal capacity and through Lenskart Vision Fund to help startups. While you were in your entrepreneurship journey, what made you, like KK started it after he finished his entrepreneurship journey. He might have done some angels, but you started it during the course of your journey. How do you see this evolving? How do you see, and what made you want to do this sooner than later?
Firstly, TCM were carrying the baton forward, I think, in that sense, and because everything happens at 10x speed every year that passes by. The speed, we better start early than late. Otherwise, things have to happen faster. But I think overall, if I reflect back, I think the overall arching theme of whether it is personal or through Lenskart is about, building a better future. I think that seems to be the commonality in terms of this is where the future is. The world is changing so rapidly. Every 10 years, the pace of change is higher, multifold higher than the previous 10 years. And today there is an opportunity to be part of this ecosystem. And while I think from Lenskart perspective, whenever we invest, it is largely to see if this is helping us, meet our mission of, changing the way people see and improving their lives with eyewear better. And from a personal perspective, I think there are a bunch of reasons, right? One is, I think it's overall very exciting. It keeps you in action. You continue to meet great entrepreneurs, you learn. The association is also very powerful, right? I think it is, I know every time I invest in a stock, even in the public market, you always try and use that product. But every time if you invest with the hope that this product or business will change the world or this entrepreneur. So I think that action and excitement more than the financial returns, because this is not really run like a family office right now, is just amazing. And I think some of the problems for me that people are working on seems like these are big problems. It will be exciting to work with these entrepreneurs and with the hope that something big will get and very impactful will get created. And lastly, I would say that there is that element of, giving back from the mistakes and learning, which I think Amit also touched upon. Now, that has a pro and cons. You don't also don't want, the new world is also way, way better than the current world. So I think, but there is that element of, most of the times the investment have an element of that, the same, we are still part of that new generation. So the same thing continues and we are able to help and contribute a little bit.
And take forward this, how are you able to help the companies in which you invested?
I think
already as an entrepreneur, you must be doing maybe 25/8, right? 25 hours a day.
Yeah.
So how are you able to take time out and where exactly are entrepreneurs coming back and, asking for help?
TCM, I think you take out time when it is, which is why the companies that you select, that filter has to be there, that is this an exciting. If it is just from an investment perspective, the chances of you taking out time will be lesser. So because I have personally chosen areas that are of interest to me, it makes it easier. For me, actually, the time usually is on a Sunday. Because for me, that is my relaxing day. Now, for my wife, it could be work. For me, it is actually, getting away from my day-to-day at Lenskart. Most of the time, I think TCM people are coming back on how to build a brand, how to think about consumer, how to think about scaling up team. These are I think largely the biggest impact, at least from my side, has been on people and brand only.
Okay. And you alluded to saying that, I think with your operating experience, you'll be able to reduce the number of companies that don't make it, right? Are there any specific areas that you are able to, and you are actually taking an approach of maybe much more engagement than a classical financial investor would be? So what are the areas in which you are helping the entrepreneurs?
No, I think there are a couple of areas which really come out. One is in terms of team building. What we see in startup is when I start scaling up, invariably the next level of management is my friends and family, because those are the only ones which I'm able to attract. Whereas through our networks, we're able to bring the right people for the right job and help them evolve a structure which is built for scale. That's one area. The second thing, particularly since we're in the enterprise technology and looking at global markets, clearly the network helps. Already with a couple of companies we're invested in, we've helped them acquire new customers because we have a Rolodex of customers, potential business people with whom we've worked with. So really expanding the network and helping them navigate enterprise technology selling. because people don't understand that. People think if you build a good product, enterprises will give you the purchase order when you just present it to them. So navigating through that difficult enterprise technology selling is other thing. The third aspect is, if you want to build high quality organizations, people, culture, and the processes relating to attracting and retaining people need to be a part of the foundational aspects of the organization. So how do you think culture backwards rather than thinking about people and culture after you've scaled? So that's a softer part of the thing. So there are multiple areas where today we tell an entrepreneur, if you think you have a problem, just use us as a sounding board. We are not on the opposite sides, we are in it together. That's the way we position ourselves.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And this conference is also about, sustainability, right? And, each of you come from background, and I thought, if we could start, share a little bit about where you have had to take decisions or seen adoption of sustainable use of resources. And in some cases, currently this has become much more mainstream, right? And there are others who have done it possibly much earlier also. So from your experience, if you can share, and which could be helpful for the audience to think through in terms of, because maybe we can start with Manish.
TCM, I think, sustainability has become a buzzword today, but much before sustainability came, I think if I go back to about 10 years back when I began to lead the supply chain for Asian Paints, and the imperative of the hour was to put up very, very large, very automated manufacturing plants. And I think one of the greatest impediments for doing that was the track record that the paint industry was, sort of a red category industry, an industry which required a lot of environment approvals to get in. But one of the ways to ease this environment or approval, as we found, was to become far more compliant, which means reduce waste, try and recycle as much raw material back. And in the bargain, our historical plants used to have 2% waste, so to speak, in raw material. That was sort of the average that we used to have. We created these zero discharge, fully automated, fully closed loop plants, which today sort of waste maybe 0.1% of material that is put into the process, which means we have gained with this whole sustainable implementation that we've got, we would recycle pretty much all of the waste back into process. In many cases, treating it a little bit, in many cases, storing it, and in some cases, even altering product formulations so that we could incorporate this part of it. The company gained 1.9%. Paint is a fairly material intensive process. 60% of our selling cost is material at an average level in some sense of the word. If you say 1.9%, which means almost close to 2%, 3% savings is what you've been able to, maybe even more, in many cases 4 or 5% savings. That's a phenomenal boost in one case to our bottom line, but more importantly to the environment. So I think in the bargain, while helping environment and looking at sustainability goals, we sort of also helped our bottom line, which is in some sense one of the greatest things that we did to begin with. Next, and working with the success, I think everybody in the team in the manufacturing plants as well as in supply chain realized that we needed to go look for more such avenues for investment, which came with the next frontier where we invested in solar resources on the rooftops of our factory. So Asian Paints would probably have some of the largest rooftop installations of solar. In fact, our combined utilization of solar capacity is now at 50% in some sense of the word, albeit that has got one large solar farm outside. From in-house resources, we might be at about 37 to 40%. Again, in the same case, we're using a better class of energy, a more sustainable form of energy. But in the bargain, we have in some sense reduced our operating costs, so to speak, out there. albeit yes, the investment probably gives a 8-9% IRR, so to speak, and a longer payback period of 8 odd years, but there is still a payback. And we are not measuring the payback in terms of the kind of impact that we have created on the environment, a positive impact that we would have created on the environment. That cost is not even factored in this equation, and we are yet producing returns that would be acceptable for this kind of investment in some sense of it. So I think these were some of the projects that we did, wherein we got tremendous benefits at what I would call an operating level, but more importantly, we made a fairly big and sustainable impact. And last but not the least, like a lot of us want to think, the consumers of tomorrow are going to really appreciate the fact that the products that they're using are being produced in as sustainable a fashion as can be practical with that product.
Thank you, Manish. And this all happened before sustainability became a buzzword, right? I mean, from your experience, are there instances that you can share which will be helpful?
I'll share maybe two instances here, I think, and the sustainability for us, I think it should be part of the culture. I think it's a way of doing things. I'll give you an example. In our tea factory, for example, for the last 25 plus years, 100% of the energy is coming from renewable sources. And I'm talking 25 years, not just 5 years or 10 years before. And no one had sustainability, and we are not into a B2C type brand where we needed to showcase to the customer something. So that's one. Second, when we were in the pulp and paper business, so people were saying, timber was used for making pulp, etc. But there's a sustainable way of doing it as well. In fact, we were planting more trees than what we were supposedly consuming. We were planting close to 100 million trees a year. This has been over the last 20 odd years. Incrementally, without owning an inch of land, we were getting farmers to grow trees on almost 100 million a year. And we also ended up putting the first elemental chlorine-free pulp mill in the country. So these are all things which at the point of time when you are doing, there are no tangible or objective benefits that you can put on. Maybe at that point of time, wind energy was more costly than the conventional energy. But I think you just have to believe in what you do, and you have to be a little futuristic and long-term oriented. That this is good, and it is in the long term it will pay off. Sometimes actually maybe more than what you expect, it will pay off better. So I think it has to be ingrained in your culture, part of your DNA, and I think it becomes easier to do.
Yeah. Peyush, how about the startups, the new age startups thinking about it? Even Lenskart and others, in terms of thinking about sustainable use of resources or all the related areas. Because one day one can always look at it saying that e-commerce is sending, in fact, when you orders sometimes on e-commerce sites, you get two different, same order, you get two different shipments. You start thinking about saying that so much more material got used, so much of more delivery time by, in a scooter came. So sometimes efficiencies may be what they are, but they are not always necessarily sustainable, right? Even the global production hubs being there, but then material goes all the way to the global production hub, and then produced items come back all the way to consumption centers. How do startups think about it now?
So TCM, I think startups definitely have a lot of consciousness. I would say at a macro level, I would say overall, if I look at the percentage of companies that would be more conscious today, my personal sense is it will be more. Because I think the overall arching theme of doing what is right and being very purpose driven is a bigger theme right now. I think even in India today, US, this was, you could see this with the customers also. But I think doing what is right and what Amit mentioned, it has to become part of the culture. We at Lenskart, even before we could understand the long-term impact of things at very early stage, stopped selling plastic 7-8 years back, when we could not even probably do the math of supply chain, etc. And it was largely because we felt that we are here with a very strong purpose. This is something that is not good for the environment. And today, I think we have all seen, especially with COVID over the last 2 years, I think it should be even more clear that doing things which are right for the environment overall. And I think all of the ecosystems and technologies exist today. You know what Manish mentioned in terms of solar, zero water discharge. There is an incremental cost to doing this, but if we want to build global companies, we want to sustainably work in this environment, these are sort of cost of doing business today. You know, we pay a certain this tax, that tax. We don't question those today, right? And a lot of governance has gone up today in all the invested companies. And I think even from an investor viewpoint, I think there is a big mindset, and I want to mention this is that, you know, every investment I've done from stage one, they always say Big Four should be your auditor. I think there should be also a mandate that you have to be sustainable. Because if we can build these billions of dollars of companies, this is a very, very small price to pay, right? Today, we are doing this in the, people side. We are doing it on every aspect. We are saying this is, when we say the engineering cost in India has become probably 100 times from when we started the business 10 years back. But we are saying this is the cost of doing business. I think sustainability has to be looked like that. There is no other way. Otherwise, things will start collapsing. It is part of the culture. It is almost mandatory in my view, right? From packaging to products. One is of course energy, but I think even in the products, like you don't necessarily need to sell plastic eyeglasses and plastic lenses. In fact, if you look at globally, people are getting rid of it. So why should it be get dumped into India? India today is creating the global companies of the world. And so I think that mindset changing, so much excitement is happening in India. The whole world wants to come and invest in India. It's a cultural shift. Once it becomes, and ESG is becoming so popular, right? Even I think it is also hinting towards the same thing, that if we want to build sustainable companies like Asian Paints over the next 50 years and not over the next 5 years, this is also almost imperative to be done.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting.
We just hired somebody very senior to just look at ESG, right now.
Yeah, thank you, Peyush, giving that perspective, because even Chiratae, last 5 years, we have been ESG compliant, and 95% of our companies are ESG compliant, right? So that is something that today comes more from capital allocation beyond regulation. Okay, there is and whereas now we heard from, Manish, Amit, and from Peyush saying that, it need not come from because of external forces. And what has been, what is your view, and how have you looked at it during Mindtree or now when you are looking at investing?
I just believe that sustainability is a major business opportunity. And just to give some numbers here, I was reading a report by the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, which indicates that achieving SDGs just in 4 sectors, food and agriculture, cities, engineering, energy and materials, and health, alone will create a $12 trillion new business opportunities by 2030. Looking at another report which says Better Business, Better World, that says reducing carbon emission and water use will generate profits of more than 17 trillion now. So it's not something which is in the air. Just to give you a very simple example, today many large corporates spend so much on buying branded water. I'm sure if you look at, I think crores of rupees are being spent. Why should they not go into a technology like Source Global, which has built a technology using solar to draw pure high quality water from the air? So I tend to, in a way, agree with Peyush that mindset change has to come. There will be existing approaches which you have, but large companies need to be the approach and state unequivocally their commitment towards sustainable businesses which are improving the environment, because the younger generation is far more sensitive to that. So it will definitely create an environment where you get better quality of employees, better customers will come to you, which will lead to higher value creation for all stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you made, KK, about even consumers becoming far more sensitive and deciding, which brand to buy based on actually their own, sustainability agenda. So I think people are becoming a lot more conscious about it.
Even employees, TCM, even employees are becoming.
Yeah, TCM, maybe you can share your experience on how you are looking at investment and weaving in ESG into your investment roadmap and support while maybe not being an impact fund, so to speak. And how your thinking at Chiratae saying might be useful for a lot of people joining this conference on how a large institutional investor is thinking about this mindset of this space.
Yeah, I think, I think Manish, you know this, our evolution. Basically we always thought that, okay, as a tech fund, we are creating impact, but, beyond that, we did not actually start measuring any of those things. But I think somewhere in 2016, when we started raising money from larger institutional investors, this question came up saying that, okay, now, how are you driving compliance to some of the requirements, like what we will have, how will you be able to do it? And interestingly, that when we started measuring it, we were actually very surprised. While we are not an impact fund, I think the impact created by our portfolio companies is substantial, and it's not just a question of creating employment, which is what the normal standard impact that people talk about, but in terms of in healthcare, in financial inclusion, in across the spectrum, right? In the Lenskart is a classic example. Nowadays they ship like 7 million frames to their customers on an annual basis, and that is something phenomenal, bringing affordability to the customers, right? To help them correct their vision requirements, which is highly underpenetrated. Is something that we never looked at it in that sense. Now, when we start looking at it, actually, it is in addition to normally getting our outcome, we are now also able to see significant things that are happening, including, for example, how companies are looking at gender balance area, right? And consciously focusing on it, and that's becoming a big differentiator for attracting talent now. So these are some areas that we have looked at. Agri-tech, which we have looked at, substantial changes, and where people are talking about sustainable material being sold to the farmers, which will lead to going forward organic outputs, right? So I think it was an eye-opener for us in the last 5 years, and also we started tracking those in quantitative terms in our portfolio companies. We have released our impact report, which covers some of those recently. And this is becoming actually mandatory. There is $4 trillion of capital from very, very large pools of resources, pensions and endowments and all of that, and government funds, which are allocated to this, which will not invest in companies which are not ESG compliant going forward, or funds which are not ESG compliant. So capital also plays a very important role. While this small fraction of total allocable investment, I think this startup should look at it. Whether they are in a sustainability industry, which KK, I think we should move to that. What you mentioned about the $12 trillion dollar opportunity.
Exactly.
Which is there, right? And that is something that we see in health tech, right? India is highly underpenetrated. Only technology will be able to solve many of the health problems of India. Amit, talking about sustainability businesses, right? They become far more commercially viable, right? What earlier used to be high cost is no more high cost. Today, maybe solar energy is cheaper than the fossil fuel energy, right? It's just that we are not getting it full time, right? And I'm sure technology will solve for storage and then usage and other things where a lot of investment dollars are going in. How do you see business models evolve with this, right? And have you seen any innovations coming in that side?
So many TCM, and I think solar is the right example you took. I think how it has evolved, and if you see, while solar has been around for the last more than 2-3 decades, it has only got mainstream over the last 5-7 years. this last decade, I think it is seen, and all of a sudden, the inflection point, no one could see it coming, but it became mainstream, and it is lower than this thing. So I think, and business models within solar, if I just extend that example, earlier it was just ground mounted, now you have rooftop, now you have residence, which is net metering, then you have some of the other off-grid opportunities, and now you have crowdsourcing of capital for even solar plants. So all types of innovations are happening in this simple thing like solar itself. And I think when it comes to water or agri, I think the business models we cannot sit and fathom here. I think the only thing we need to do is we need to be very open-minded about looking at each opportunity. Because I think capital is not a constraint anymore for the first time. Unlike 10, 15 years back, where for any of these technologies to become mainstream, capital was the big problem. Today, capital is not. In fact, there is much more capital waiting on the sideline to be put to use, which I don't think historically was there ever earlier. So business models will evolve faster and in more innovative ways than we can sit and imagine here. Only we have to be open-minded about those opportunities and catch them, I think. And for entrepreneurs, I think it's a land of opportunities, if I can say so. And your sustainability is not just going to be another part of it. The sustainable technology or the sustainable idea itself will become a mainstream business opportunity, which can be scalable, not just in a niche.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that because I was in an MIT challenge in Bangladesh as a jury member. Developing countries today are leading in terms of sustainability thinking. Earlier thought process always used to be saying that, okay, it's always created in developed world and then transported down. Technology comes from there. Today people are not only looking at technology, and business models are evolving. And that was very interesting. And especially you spoke about water, right? In terms of being able to give clean, potable water to local communities, how people are solving for it. One can take a very interesting, very, let's say, passive approach saying that it's government's job, right? Another is to say, how am I solving for it at a community level? That is very interesting to see.
But to assume it's the government job is just trying to flick the problem, try to put it under the carpet. I think it is the entrepreneur who want to solve this.
Yeah. Go ahead, TCL.
Yeah, from your vantage point, what are some of the attractive opportunities, like KK was mentioning, that you are seeing, which are big opportunities for entrepreneurs to go after?
So I think two areas, two broad areas, I would say at a very high level. One is, of course, renewable energy and its application. And I include, electric vehicles as an application of renewable energy of sorts. I do not look at that whole category as a new category. Anywhere where you can repurpose appliances, including two-wheelers and four-wheelers, for usability of a much cleaner source of energy than fossil fuels, obviously is covered as part of the larger renewable energy drive that we're seeing. Second, I think, is going to be climate change. I know climate change sometimes gets the minute you use the word, the image you get is maybe Greta Thunberg and a lot of activism. But I think there is truly going to be opportunity, as we were hearing the fag end of the previous session, and you were looking at Sean talking about so many technologies around the world that are actually going to sort of impact climate change, and the opportunities that could give from I think metering and diagnosing the challenges of climate change. I'm sure as we move forward, you will get people who will be solving problems related to climate change, and then obviously measuring the impact of those solutions. I think this is an entire ecosystem that we don't really see. We see most of these as philanthropic drives. I'm sure each of those will get converted to, in some sense of the word, a business of sorts. In some sense of the word. So I think these are two big areas in sort of the physical world that I see. Then obviously there is this role of technology. I think we saw earlier technology look at efficiency. The current wave of technology is looking at almost creation. We are creating new business models with the utilization of technology and the digital innovation. I think the future is going to be about, intervening technology with, goals on sustainability and accelerating it increasing the scale of penetration and reach that we want to have, I think technology is going to play a phenomenally large role. Obviously, it has a direct role in monitoring that it will continue to play. I think there will be many people looking at solutions and probably building businesses in each of these areas in some sense of the word. Last but not the least, I think, when you look at ESG and sustainability, you can't forget the social impact. Our greatest challenge is measurement of social impact. And I think we're going to have to look at, let's say, some of your fintech companies. How can we weave the world of fintech, whose job was to give money to smaller, less privileged people? And is there a way of tracking improvement in their livelihood as a means to measure social impact in some sense of word for many of the schemes we've got? And can we actually create that as a self-propagating ecosystem? So I personally think that from the physical world, where renewable energy and climate change are going to be there, where you look at the digital world and look at the impact of technology, and then when you look at the social world and you look at what technology in combination with that can do, I think we're going to see investments all across, and you're going to probably see businesses, quote unquote, for profit. Because the mistake many people make is, oh, by the way, I have a business that makes profit. That doesn't mean that you're not unsustainable. I think if businesses don't make money for themselves, they will not be sustainable. So I think producing these things will be somewhat of a huge upside. Finally, last but not the least, you just look at young minds. Peyush is sitting here, much younger than all of us. He's approached the problem that was probably staring in our face for many, many years very differently and built a scalable company. I think in many of these newer areas of sustainability, we would continue to look to the younger generation to give us solutions that could that can be fairly innovative and impactful in that sense of the word, because they would approach the problem very differently than sort of the set businesses of today, who need to move from their terra firma and then approach to new grounds, whereas startups could just appropriate a new property and then move on in some sense.
Yeah, so they don't have baggage of existing.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Peyush, one of the challenges that some companies would face, especially in a very competitive world, is that sometimes focus on ESG and, let's say, responsible resources tends to increase cost of the delivered product, right? And is a consumer today ready to differentiate that and pay for it, or still the company has to absorb that cost? What has been your experience and around that you have seen?
So PCM, I think consumer is becoming conscious, but I do feel that some of these bets don't need to be taken with that math right now. They are definitely a lot more conscious. I don't think one needs to really measure and calculate and do it that way. More than I still believe that it has to be tied to the purpose of the organization. I think Manish was talking about businesses. I'll take example of a business like Airbnb. In my view, that's a big step towards sustainability, right? And it has improved the quality of life. Today, our work-life balance into this 25/8 culture is that, health is a big sustainable issue. How do you sustain yourself in that lifestyle for many years, and how do you build an ecosystem? So I think, coming back to your point, consumer is becoming conscious. I think if you can make the consumer aware about some of these initiatives, sometimes organizations don't talk about it. We are also in that bucket. I think consumers are becoming conscious. I think employees are becoming even more conscious. I think if you ask me, in today's environment, consumer and people are actually equally big areas. Maybe 10 years back, at least from the time I have started, consumer would be a bigger problem and people would be lesser. And I'm saying from a problem perspective, as challenges that companies need to solve. Today, it is so competitive out there that people and consumer, I would say people probably is even bigger than consumer. Talent density, talent retention, talent motivation, aligning them to a purpose. So when you bring that aspect and then you look at the cost of some of these things, then it is multifold. It is paying you back in many, because I want to work for a sustainable organization. And if I can even retain, 30% of my manpower, or I can build a culture where people are motivated to come to work every day and their motivation is higher. I mean, the returns are significant, on what can be built. So I think, yes, people are becoming conscious.
Yeah. Okay, one of the key challenges that most investors have felt is how is the reporting, how is the tracking and reporting on some of these things taking place? And now there are standards coming out, right? And also, SEBI has also mandated saying that some ESG reporting has to take place by, top listed companies. What are the challenges that you are looking at? Is that an opportunity for, again, people to solve for?
No, I think in today's environment, the initial standards have been set. Again, going back to the Mindtree example, we started releasing our sustainability reports almost 10 years back. And that used to be, along with the annual report, a sustainability report used to go. And we were also one of the early signatories to the UN effort on listed companies subscribing to how they're doing on ESG initiatives. So there's enough of a body of knowledge available. And like Peyush rightly said, a lot of the young entrepreneurs are sensitive to this. What I think we need to do is to educate them. And obviously it is impossible for them to do all that a big company is doing. But pick out a few key things and make a simple template by which they can start tracking their ESG initiatives. So I'm very bullish on this because I think the basic framework is available. What we need to do is to educate entrepreneurs who are very conscious of that to start following a simple template, and the moment that becomes little more mainstream. As investors, just like today we look at what is the margins, what is the business model, what are the customer acquisitions, we'll have a good little framework by which consciously we can also evaluate how is the company thinking on sustainability.
Okay. Now we are almost getting close to the end of this. This is a very large topic for us to actually cover it in 1 hour. Just want to go around the table in terms of how do you see, if you were to crystal ball days in the next 5 years and 10 years, what are the significant things that could be achieved by the ecosystem? Manish, you want to start? I think you are
not able to get what you want us to cover. Sorry, can you repeat?
In the next 5 to 10 years, you see both in terms of, let's say, entrepreneurship side, as well as in terms of sustainability industry side, right? What do you think would be achieved?
So I would say that TCM, we are going to see some fairly large businesses. Obviously, the energy area has already attracted very large investments. So you see many companies, including giants like Reliance and Adani here, refashioning the businesses to look at renewable energy as a very large business area for investment in some sense of the word. So obviously that kind of bandwagon is, it's already become a juggernaut of sorts and has gathered its own momentum. I'm sure it'll become a full meaning industry, and I'm pretty sure we are never going to drill the last barrel of oil from the ground because it'll just become too expensive to do that compared to much cleaner, much easier resources that we can probably latch on to today. I see a lot of investments in technology that would help be able to monitor the impact of change of weather, change of climate. I think just like we look at our body and the kind of evolution medical technology has made, I think you will see an evolution of new technology, look at how to predict the impact that we are creating in each of the areas on our environment and how we could potentially reverse that impact to the extent that we can and leave sort of the world a better place for the next generation in some sense of it. I think you will see some excellent IoT, blockchain sort of initiatives that will take this forward in some sense of what I really see businesses get created around that area. I see a lot of businesses look at waste and recycling as a means to create new avenues for growth. I mean, you look at Peyush here and they use a lot of frames, and it is going to become almost mandatory to use 100% recyclable materials at some point of time. I know that they use them already, but I'm saying it's going to become mandatory for everybody, not only large established enterprises, but pretty much everybody in some sense. And each of the businesses is going to have to refashion themselves, from the clothes we wear, the carpets that we have in the house, the fabric we use on our furniture, pretty much everything. I mean, recyclable is not going to become a marketing jargon. It's going to become hygiene in some sense of the word. If you're not using, so I see that these models become hygiene, and that's what I really see. When I look at health and the entrepreneur ecosystem there, I think we're going to see many innovations. And I think the greatest thing that I would request everybody in the conference to do is look at the supporting structures in government that need to get facilitated or need to change to be able to create an environment that could support such creativity. It took a long time to look at sharing of renewable energy back to the grid and coming up with rules that make sense to consumers in some sense of the word. I think we'll be faced with many more challenges, and we look forward to making sure that the laws of tomorrow support a far more sustainable world in many, many different ways, in some sense.
Okay.
I would think if you think of sustainable development, it should be classified as how do you meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation. So I think people should get more sensitive to it. Having said that, I believe the sustainability of entrepreneurship is here to stay. If today we are talking about 30 unicorns this year, I think in the next 5-10 years, clearly there will be 500 to 1,000 unicorns which will come out of India, both based on the technology businesses and the new areas of sustainability. And I'd just like to capture the business opportunity in sustainability with just one sentence. Sustainability is the next digital. If digital transformation has led to probably $500 billion of business opportunities, sustainability businesses are going to be 3 to 4 times bigger than that. So sustainability is the next digital.
Yeah, that's awesome, KK. Amit?
So Manish and KK have just preempted and done my job easier. So I think in 2 parts, if I have to say, so I think for the existing businesses, as Manish very rightly put, it is hygiene. Sustainability is not an option anymore. Either you are doing it or not doing it. It is hygiene, not avoidable. And for the new age businesses, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg for sustainability related businesses. I think there's a huge opportunity for an entrepreneur and for investors, therefore, to get into businesses which are centric around sustainable, whether it is water, circular economy, or anything. To summarize, I think this is, and we're getting very excited that, the time has come, Reliance, Adani, all the other guys making big investments, and everyone is talking, it's a buzzword. But I think this is just the trailer. Picture abhi baki hai, is what I would summarize as.
And Peyush?
Yeah, I think I agree with Manish that a lot of this will become almost mandatory. And for example, if you look at in a lot of states today, the packaging, the e-commerce wrapper, there are guidelines now of that you cannot just use a plastic wrapper, right? And all companies had to overnight change and adhere to these guidelines. Similarly, I think a lot of guidelines. So while I think there are bigger investments by, in power and energy, I think there will be a lot of new age startups which have opportunity. I mean, even if I look at packaging as an industry, we have seen large companies go public in India, which are working on packaging. And today packaging is a large opportunity. We saw that when e-commerce developed, so many services businesses are today unicorns actually. Delivery, logistics, SaaS companies of different kind. These all actually got built around commerce and are actually favorites of investors because they are more profitable, they return money. Similarly, I think there are so many more opportunities which may today look small, but will actually become way bigger because how many packaging companies today will be offering, just an example, I'm looking at packaging, will be offering sustainable packaging. primary packaging, secondary packaging. And with e-commerce becoming so big, everybody needs it. So I think like this, there will be so many small opportunities we can't even think of, which are totally doable by, you don't need large sums of capital. You just need an idea, focus. So I think the opportunities will be very big in the sense that, and the growth will also be very high for these companies because, first mover advantage in the market. Because this is going to sooner or later going to become a hygiene more and more in every aspect of the business.
Yeah, that is true. In fact, the way I look at it, energy storage technology,
Yes.
if it can actually substantially bring down the cost of energy storage, actually we don't need a thermal power, right? Today the vagaries of, so that is one huge area that in the next 10 years.
Internet, I think power, all of this, right? Even office, today if I have retail stores and we are running, 1,000, 1,500 retail stores, the energy consumption there is pretty high. And while somebody may put a solar plant at a macro level with a lot of capital, but how to save energy at a local level could totally differentiate the unit economics of a company, and startups will come there and solve these problems.
Agree. And also, and I think Manish and Amit spoke about waste management and, circular economy. Swachh Bharat 2 also, where now Prime Minister has spoken about the fact that, we should bring down all these mountains of garbage which is float in all of these cities. It's a classic example where it is getting noticed. And these are opportunities. These are also mountains of opportunities that we should look at it. And there is a phenomenal opportunity in the sustainability industry, like KK said that it is the next digital.
TCM next one I think is bottling, right? I think sooner or later bottling there are going to be very, very hard rules coming out, and an entrepreneur can go build a very great business because nobody is really preparing for it. But so much Bisleri water consumption, this Aquafina and all, it's all plastic. Sooner or later there's going to be a rule, and there is such a big entrepreneurial opportunity around this.
If you see the Netflix documentary on what these water companies do, which is why I talked about Source Global. Why should there be water companies when you can take out moisture from the atmosphere through technology and generate high quality water? It's just that scale needs to be built up and costs need to come down, and that will happen. That will happen not in the next 5 years, it will happen in the next 1-2 years.
Yeah, so I think on that note, we are at the end of the hour. Thank you, Manish, KK, Amit, and Peyush for taking time to share your perspective and continuing to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and look forward to possibly being part of some of the journeys together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, TCM.
Thank you.
Thank you, TCM.
Yeah, and thanks, Tai, for actually providing an opportunity for us to share the perspective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ekta. Thanks, Tai.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, TCM, KK, Manish, Peyush, and Amit, for such a wonderful conversation. We spoke about conscious consumers, focus on ESGs, evolving regulation, technologies, and opportunities. And as Amit rightly said, picture abhi baki hai. It was a wonderful conversation that we had.